Here's the situation, right? You're late for calling your role in the lobby, or you're in ranked and you're last pick, and for some reason you really don't want to play a typical Guardian in support. Absolutely justifiable in my opinion. There are many options that you could choose from that don't classically fit in the support role in a traditional sense, are not your typical Guardian frontliner tank, and you can still do well with them in one way or another. Many of them have their own specific niche, be it countering the enemy team, or be it countering their early aggression with more aggression, or something else. There are so many ways in which guards can be played as support, and if you're somebody who really doesn't like the role, it's understandable that you would not opt for the character that are the archetypical guards for that role. And I don't think anyone should be blamed for that. I personally enjoy playing support. For me it's not much of an issue in most situations, but I know that a lot of people just don't like it as much, and playing a guard that you like playing in that role to make it a bit more comfortable for yourself is something that I can absolutely understand. There is, however, one issue that I constantly see when people that pick non-support guards in the support role play with me or play against me, and it's just very frustrating to watch that happen over and over again. And that is them building as if they were in another role. You see plenty of people picking mages for support and then still going for a full damage mage build. You see the same thing with warriors, still going for a full solo lane build with only CDR. Then you see assassin supports that only invest into damage. And that just doesn't work in most games. Now, it can work. Theoretically, if your team snowballs hard enough, you can get away with just having carries and damage dealers on your team, for example, or not needing anything else and just win the game before it becomes relevant. But especially in the current meta, most games aren't over by 15 minutes. Most games go longer than that. Surrenders happen, but they aren't the norm. Most games drag on at least until 30 minutes plus in my personal experience. And that has an impact on how you have to play and what you have to do. Because if you get to 30 minutes plus, if you have those long Phoenix sieges, if you have the contest of objectives like Fire Giant, then you will have to have some sort of teamfight potential. If you're playing a Naja support and you only build into damage, then maybe you can get a pick, but you will still not have a frontline unless your solo laner kind of made that up for you and is the front line on his own and also provides the team with the stats that they need. But what are the stats you need? One crucial thing that supports get over anyone else on the team in most situations are aura items. At the moment, aura items are really strong, they're really cheap to build, they are easy to stack in the case of Thieves, and they also provide you with a lot of stats for their price. I would argue that Thieves in any situation is better than Height of the Urchin for a support, and you should never build Height of the Urchin before Thieves in the current state of the game. And by skipping those items, you put your team at a major disadvantage. I'm not saying you need Thieves plus Hardwood plus Sov every single game, though I will say that if you did that, you probably wouldn't go all too wrong with it either, because those stats will always be beneficial and they counter out a lot of what the opponents can build, like Spear of the Magus at the moment as well. But it's not just about that. It's about the fact that if I were to, for example, play Naja and build a lot of damage, then I would probably have to invest a lot more gold into that too. Support items are designed for supports. They are typically not as beneficial for other roles. A solo laner doesn't benefit as much from building auras when a lot of the time in the game is spent on his own. And likewise, a jungler would typically have better protection items that either provide him with more CDR or with more protection reduction, for example, just to amplify his own damage while building protection, whereas aura items are simply there to help your team. So the one that gets those items is the one that gets the least gold, because it makes his build cheaper and it makes it more affordable overall, and that is exactly what's the niche for the support, the situation for the support in many games. You aren't the one that's snowballing super hard and taking all the kills, you aren't the one that's taking up all the farm on his own, you are the one that helps out lanes. And when you're the one who helps out lanes, then you should look for cheap options that help your team as much as possible. Now you may say that you need specific items to be effective with the character you're playing. And that is not wrong. That applies for many of the unusual supports. So for example, you don't really have to go into Guardian's Blessing. Guardian's Blessing is a great item and it provides you with a lot of extra gold that is really beneficial for you, but doesn't mean that you have to build it. If you want to have early aggression over extra gold early on and get your gold through kills, that is a perfectly reasonable choice, and that is something that can be done with many of the unusual supports. If you're playing a high aggro support, then I'd rather have some extra damage and kill potential over some extra gold that I can basically almost make up for with the higher amount of kills that I can secure and the higher amount of lane pressure that I can get. Also, those who benefit from Mage's Blessing will have significantly better clear of camps on their own, which is good for supports. Because for example, back camps on the duo side is something you can easily farm on your own for some extra farm when you have fast clear as a support. And in that regard, Mage's Blessing is excellent, or maybe even Hunter's Blessing on a few select supports. Those things kind of have their own benefit, like pressure or anything else that really helps your character specifically. Likewise, even outside of that, you're not completely limited to only support items. If you're playing, for example, Odin and you want to go for a super high early aggression and build a Jotuns and then go into an aura, I think that is acceptable. You will have that high lane pressure, that high kill potential, and that high cooldown reduction, which still will help your team later on, and you just go into auras afterwards. It's not something I would personally do, but I think it's very understandable why that is chosen. Even in the background footage, you'll see me play Naja support and build Crusher at some point, because I want to have that extra clear, that extra aggression, and, you know, just a little bit of an extra fighting potential as the situation in the game kind of benefits from it. If you're playing a Nox support and you want to fit cooldown reduction into there somewhere with a non-typical support item, either a defense cooldown item or maybe even Chronos Pendant, that should be manageable. If you're playing a Circuit support and you want to have a little bit of extra damage through your abilities as well with Titan's Bane, that should be manageable. If you're playing a Hell support and you invest into some more movement speed or some more healing or some more cooldown reduction, something like that, that is totally fine. There are options for that within the support branches, but there are also options outside of your typical support items that will still be okay, as long as they don't make up the core of your build. You want to have a lot of defense, you want to have the potential to be able to frontline, you want to have those auras for your team. Those are the things that should come first and should be the most important ones, and the items outside of that should be the ones that are more flex. Typically the spots where supports would also flex their items more and opt into something like Spirit Robe, for example. That's not essential but very helpful. There are so many more or less unusual supports that different points can be made for. Amaterasu, for example, can benefit greatly from cooldown reduction. Aphrodite, similar to Hell. Along Shen, again, can benefit from a little bit of cooldown reduction or even a little bit of attack speed early on through boots, for example, for more aggression. Guan Yu can benefit from cooldown reduction for heals outside of the norm, basically higher cooldown reduction items. Then you have those like Isis, Odin, Naja, who can all benefit from a little bit of damage. Or looking more towards the magical side, Raijin or Shangqi as supports who can greatly benefit from Gem of Isolation in order to give them a little more CC than they would typically have in their kit and have a bit more impact that way. Often you will find at least an unusual starter on them, and often you will find at least one atypical item outside of that as well. But that should be about it in most cases, unless you're very, very aware of what you're doing and you know exactly why you're building in a different path and why it will work and why you won't fall behind in gold, or possibly already have a lead that will allow for that build without setting your team back in return for it. If you end up in the support role, have a support mindset. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't get any kills in the game or shouldn't deal damage, but it should just not be your primary job. Your primary job should be getting your carry through the laning phase the best possible, depending on how your character can do that, and then helping your team as much as possible. And if you absolutely don't want to go into aura items, or maybe you get a massive lead early on and think you would be better off in a carrion position, then communicate. Ask especially your solo laner, but possibly also your jungler, depending on the god they're playing, if they can invest into some aura items instead, if they can build certain things that can help the team a little more in places where you're unable to do it. Don't be the guy who didn't get mid because he didn't call it fast enough, plays Nox support, builds their full damage, and doesn't even tell his team that that was his plan all along. It doesn't work, and even if it happens to work in your particular case, it will probably still ruin it for the rest of your team, and it'll probably not be something that works on a regular basis, because in most situations you won't be ahead enough, you won't get enough gold, and all that kind of stuff that makes it just not very beneficial for your team. You're a support, act like one. And with that, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope to see you for the next one tomorrow. If you're new to the channel, feel free to click the sub button with the bell, it really helps me out. DukeSloth, out. So I actually figured out my demonetization issue and it was my outro. As such, feel free to click any of the links around here right now. There will be new outro music as soon as I find something nice. Until then, as you guys requested, I will do the outro music myself. You're welcome.